Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, she was in the crowd and she was interviewed. It was after curfew. She violated curfew. And she was interviewed about the Chauvin trial. Listen to what she said.
I would like to see the bill in Congress passed on police reform, but I know that the right wing, the racists, are opposed to it, and I don't know what's going to happen to it. Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree murder. We got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
Newt, she said stay on the streets, get more active, get more confrontational. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's racist for a black small business owner to not want their small business burned down. I think this whole absurdity that as a civilization, you either provide safety or you dissolve. And we've had both with Rashida Tlaib, who called for abolishing the police and eliminating prisons, which is a position of utter insanity. And now, of course, you have Waters, who has always been on the left. But what's happened with every passing, the more patient we are, the more radical they are. So you have over a year of violence in Portland, Oregon. You have an expectation of violence. Why should we expect violence if the criminal justice system works? Why should we tolerate violence? Why should we tolerate National Guardsmen being shot at? I think we have to really rethink our whole approach to making sure that we stop people from being violent, if necessary, by doing the opposite of what Rashida Tlaib wanted and actually increasing the prisons. But you cannot have a country which cowers in fear and which has radicals who wander around openly encouraging violence.
Mr. Speaker, you mentioned cowering in fear. How do you do that when you've got mayors? Take Jacob Frey, for example, in Minneapolis, who is an absentee mayor who really wanted to reimagine green spaces when he became mayor, and then real things happened and he's utterly incapable. When Democrat leadership has shown not only an unwillingness to stand up to the mob, but instead is effectively beholden to them, how can you expect them to actually enforce the rule of law so that, as you mentioned, that black business owner doesn't have his business burned down when the verdict doesn't come the way they want it?
Well, I think it's going to require a nationwide movement that says we're going to protect our people, we're going to protect our property, we're not going to tolerate criminals in the street. You know, when somebody's out looting, that's not a protest, that's a criminal. And they should be treated as criminals. And the fact you have a congresswoman who's actively encouraging criminals, and also you have a congresswoman in Rashida Tlaib who literally wants to abolish the police and close all the prisons. Now, if you think about that for a second, in Michigan alone, you put several 100,000 people who've been charged with assault back on the street. I mean, this is the kind of, this is not a radical ideology. This is madness. It's impossible in the real world. And I think we just have to stand up and say that, and we have to run candidates, including in places like Portland. And over time, I think we'll win, because people get tired of being frightened. They get tired of having their building burned down. They get tired of being lectured by people who are, frankly, mostly hypocritical politicians. And, you know, you've got to understand, if we're not prepared to stand up to the radicals, they will dominate the country.
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, it's toxic. Not to boil this down to politics, but saying defund the police is toxic for Democrats. And people like James Clyburn, do not say that. And he came out and said, no, we got to work on the academy. We got to work on recruiting, because if they continue down this road, the American people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, are turned off by that prospect. But let's fast forward and go talk about another thing that's not going away, although many in the media want it to, and that's the chaos at the border. The absolute criminal enterprise that's taking place with these cartels, bringing apart kids and families for money that they use to buy more drugs. So the American people are asked, is immigration a very big problem, a crisis, or what? Illegal immigrations in June of 2020, 28% of American people said it's a problem. Now here in April, 48%. I don't know where the other 52% are.
More than COVID. Look at that, Brian.
And then look at the pandemic. In June 2020, 58% is a problem. In April, it's 1 point below at 47% said it's a problem. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? Most of the media have moved on. Except for Fox, everyone else decided the other issues is overall refugees should be coming in here and what the limit should be. They've moved on from the overcrowded facilities and the 9-year-olds left alone or the 3-year-olds dropped over the wall. It doesn't seem to resonate anymore.
No, look, it resonates with the American people. That's what your poll just told you. But you have to assume that almost all the elite media is the active ally of Joe Biden. And so if it's going to hurt Biden, they're not going to cover it. In fact, if it's going to hurt Biden, you're going to have people like Twitter and Facebook actively censoring and stopping people from communicating. So this is a perfect example where the fix is in. Kamala Harris, when she was a candidate, said that she was for open borders. Then she kind of backed up a little bit. The truth is, nobody in the Biden administration is worried about the border. They want them to be as open as possible. They want as many illegal immigrants as possible. You know, when the New York Democrats pass a bill that pays $15,000 to illegal immigrants,
crazy.
They're sending a signal to, they're sending a signal to El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. How would you like to come up to New York and get 15 grand?
Yeah.
And then we go, gee, I wonder why they're all showing up at the border.
Yeah, prove you
Democrats
don't belong.
Are begging them to come in.
You show up at the desk.
Right.
I want to just tell you, I'm here illegally. I have no ID on me. I don't belong here. And they say, thank you, sir, for your honesty. Here's $15,000. It's insane.
Right. And by the way, in New York law, when you apply for the 15 grand, you're automatically registered as a voter.
Mr. Speaker, what if you don't believe in police, if you don't want, as Rashida Tlaib pointed out, you're exactly right, you don't believe in incarceration, you don't believe in borders or legality, what does, from your view, at this moment where things are so polarized, what does the left believe in?
Well, I mean, first of all, as I said a minute ago, I think we confuse insanity with a political position. Her position in any real world, let's release all the murderers, all the rapists, all the armed robbers, that position and that's why I've thought, frankly, that she also ought to lose her committee, because you can't imagine anything more dangerous than to suggest we abolish the police and we close all the prisons. That's what she called for.
So stupid.
Tracy, who's going to protect her kids if she needs them?
Radicalism.
Okay, so let's talk about. You can finish your thought.
No, I was going to say, most folks like that live in secure communities and are protected, and they don't experience anything like what they're doing to normal people.
That's true.
Let's discuss what's happening with these New York City schools and the woke mentality. So Paul Rossi is this math teacher at Grace Church School. You've probably heard of the school. It's downtown. He blasted the school for indoctrinating the students with the anti-racism ideology. Then on April 13th, last Tuesday, Andrew Gutman, who's a dad, his daughter went to Brearley, which is the #1 all-girls school in the country, very hard to get into, over anti-racism obsession. And Paul Rossi, the math teacher, he weighed in on this Brearley dad pulling his daughter out. And he said, it is not easy for parents to upend lives and pull their child out of a school. Administrators and faculty at many schools exploit this high switching cost to leverage an explicitly discriminatory and ideological agenda that is harmful to the children in their care. Parents have a moral duty to protect their children from psychological abuse, and I commend any who choose the harder road and do what is best for their children. What's your reaction to all of this?
Well, that's right. I mean, first of all, it's not anti-racism. The most racist things going on in America today are woke instruction, teaching white people they should feel guilty, dividing up the world basically by race. Let's be clear. It's the left which represents the new segregation, the new racism, the new desire to imprint across the whole society a race-based model. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for parents to decide that no matter how expensive it isn't worth it if it's going to ruin your child. And I think if more people took that position, these schools would collapse pretty rapidly, because what they're teaching is pure racist propaganda.
Right, and that parent, Andrew Gutman, says, I can't tolerate a school that not only judges my daughter by the color of her skin, but encourages and instructs her to prejudice others by theirs, by viewing every element of education, every aspect of history, every facet of society through the lens of color, race. We are utterly violating the movement for which such civil rights leaders believe, fought, and died. This father is an investment banker, obviously can afford this school, is pulling his 12-year-old out, is hoping his 12-year-old can at least finish this year in June, but they're not sure that's going to happen because they might act. And Paul Rossi, the teacher, has been suspended.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know
For
what his
safety
future is going to be
reasons,
like.
They said they asked him not to come
always
back.
safety.
Yeah, and then did you hear at Dalton School, which is a very well-known school in the Upper East Side, it's a co-ed school, the head of that school had to resign because the parents have just said they're fed up with all of this.
Yeah, and I think you'll see more and more of that as parents come to realize how really destructive this cancel culture and this wokeism is. It's astonishing that we've moved in 10 or 15 years from trying to eliminate race as a major factor to maximizing race as a major factor. And I think it's very unhealthy for the country.
Right.
And I think we're going to have to fight back and demand that we move back towards Dr. King's vision of a genuinely race-free society where you're measured by the content of your character, not the color of your skin.
And you know
Those
what?
are his words.
And Democrats have worked on the schools for years. Republicans have been ignoring it. The school boards on down, the colleges, obviously. And now they get the kids from kindergarten up, and they're wondering why things are happening like they're happening right now. Republicans got to work their way, start their influencing again on school boards. That might be the most impactful thing they can do.
I think there should be an effort on a bipartisan basis to get common sense candidates for school boards all over the country, because I think literally having lost control of the schools, we lose control of the future of the society. And it's a very grave crisis in terms of whether or not America can survive as a country dedicated to individual opportunity, not to a groupthink racist opportunity.
We're being taken down from the inside.
Well, it's school boards, it's school choice, and then it's the curriculum that even if you're on the school board and it's being, rammed down from the federal level, which has happened too, Mr. Speaker, across the board, Democrats are running Democrat camp from K through 12. It's crazy.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.